channel. My name is Blair, and this is my friend London, and today we're going to be showing you guys how to make bath bombs. This is the first video in a series of videos of tutorials on how to do kid-friendly projects. Things like bath bombs, we're going to do roll-on perfumes, body splashes, all kinds of fun stuff. And London is here to help me with that. So we've got all of our ingredients here. Most of these items can be found around your house, but I did find pretty much everything that we don't sell on Amazon, and I will link everything down in the description box so that you can find it easily. But the materials that we're going to be using today are citric acid. These are spa salts, or you can use Epsom salts if these aren't easily available for you. Baking soda or sodium bicarbonate, vegetable glycerin, SLSA, which is actually sodium lauryl sulfoacetate. This is the foaming agent that's going to make your bath bombs not only fizz, but foam. We also have a digital scale to measure everything out, some food coloring, or you can use a soap-safe colorant. I don't recommend using any kind of mica powder. It will separate once your bath bomb goes into the water and stick to the sides of your bathtub and stain your bathtub. So make sure you use a glycerin suspended soap colorant, or food coloring works just fine as well. And then the last thing that we have is our fragrance oil. We've selected the Amber Vanilla fragrance today. This is a wonderful fragrance. It's kind of amber, vanilla, sweet, sugary, very much like a women's perfume type of scent, but it smells really good. Mm-hmm. You want to make sure that your fragrance oil is soap safe so that you can use it in the bath bombs. Otherwise, if you use a fragrance oil that's not soap safe, it can become a skin irritant and you don't want to break out into a rash. So we're going to walk you through the steps on how to make these. Okay, so the first step that you're going to do is measure out all of your dry ingredients. And we've got a digital scale, a nice sized mixing bowl, some measuring spoons, a measuring cup, and a whisk to be able to measure all of this out. So London, if you'll turn the scale on there, I'll get the first ingredient. So the first thing that we're going to measure out is 10 ounces of baking soda. Any baking soda from the grocery store or wherever you find it will work perfectly fine for this. It doesn't have to be any kind of a name brand or special type of baking soda. So let's make sure it's in the right unit of measure here. We're going to measure it out by weight. And if you'll sprinkle in 10 ounces of baking soda there, you can pour it in. Got some clumps. So sometimes your baking soda will clump up. The citric acid can do that as well, but most of the time it's pretty easy to work out with your hands. Almost there. A little bit more. Perfect. Alright, so we are right at 10 ounces on our scale here. And if you want to kind of work out some of those clumps, I will get the citric acid ready for you. It's a brand new bag. I'm going to tear that guy open. Citric acid kind of sounds like a scary name. Anything with acid in it might sound a little scary. It's something that they use in baking, cooking. It can be used as a preservative, all types of things. In this case, the citric acid and the baking soda work together with water to create a chemical reaction that causes it to fizz. So these two things plus water is what will make your bath bombs fizzy. The SLSA is what's going to make your bath bomb foam. Alright, we got all the little clumps worked out? Okay, so now let's zero out our scale again. And you can use the little scoop there if you'd like. And we're going to do 5 ounces of citric acid. Yeah. And we are wearing gloves today for a couple of different reasons. For one thing, it's more sanitary to use gloves, so you're not getting any debris or outside material kind of contaminating your bath bombs. You especially want to do this if you're going to be selling them. But also, if you've got a manicure, citric acid can actually dull the fingernail polish. So, plus once we add things like the fragrance oil and the food coloring and everything, you can stain your hands. So, alright, so she's measured out 5 ounces of the citric acid. And now we're going to do 5 ounces of our bath salts or sea salts. So we'll tear that out again. You can just kind of pour it in there if you'd like.
5?
Yeah, 5 ounces. I know it looks like a lot. Almost there. Perfect. Alright, so we've got 5 ounces of the sea salts or bath salts, the citric acid and the baking soda are all in there. And the last of our dry ingredients is going to be the SLSA. And again, this is the product that will help your bath bombs be foamy. You can make the bath bombs without it, but they're just going to fizz. They're not going to give you that real bubbly effect. They don't turn your bath water as bright of color, I think. I don't know, I just feel like the SLSA helps with that as well. So for this recipe, we're going to be using 3 ounces of the SLSA. One thing to note, if you have any sensitivities to respiratory issues, I would definitely wear a mask whenever you're making these, at least until you add the wet ingredients into it. I might cough a few times whenever I'm measuring out the SLSA. It's a really fine powder, and it's not dangerous or anything, but it does kind of choke you sometimes. So I'm going to measure out 3 ounces now. And each of these scoops is about half an ounce. But I'm going to just measure it exactly on my scale just to be safe. Almost there. Boop. Come on. There we go. Perfect. Alright, so we've got all of our dry ingredients in. What we're going to do now, see, there it goes. I should have gotten a mask. Alright, London is going to take our whisk over here and mix all of the dry ingredients together thoroughly. If you prefer, you can use a sifter to mix this up. It works pretty well, just kind of working it with the whisk in your hands. But if you prefer to do it that way, it does help with getting all the little clumps and everything out. But it's not a necessity. So we're going to stir this up, and then we'll get to move on to the next step. Alright, so we've got everything good and mixed in now. So now it's time to add in the liquid ingredients. So the first thing that we're going to add is our fragrance oil. This recipe calls for 14 grams of a soap-safe fragrance. So we're going to put this back up on our scale. And our digital scales will do multiple units of measure. So I'll be able to switch this from ounces to grams with just a push of the button. If I can read, yep, that's it. Okay, so I'm going to put in, using a measuring spoon here, just to make it a little bit easier, 14 grams of the fragrance. And again, you want to make sure that it is a skin-safe or a soap-safe fragrance. I'm going to swirl it around, that's 6 grams. 10 grams. Do a little bit more, that's right at 12. There you go. So we've got 14. Ooh, I can already smell that. It smells so good. And London has chosen to go with a blue color for her bath bombs. So we're going to be using our food coloring here. This is just some natural food colorant that I got on Amazon. Again, I'll link everything down in the description box below. But any water-based food coloring should work great. So do you want a light blue or do you want more of like a dark blue?
Light.
Light blue. Okay, so we'll start out with just a few drops. Whenever you add your food coloring or your soap colorant, you'll notice that it does start to foam a little bit. You can go ahead and stir that up. And that's because the food coloring is water-based. And remember, water is what activates the foaming and the fizzing with all of our dry ingredients. So it's okay if it fizzes up a little bit, but you do want to make sure that you don't add too much of the dye so that it doesn't completely activate your bath bombs and then they don't fizz at all once you put them in your bathtub. You got a clump in the center there. It's like it's in bath bomb jail. There we go. And you might want to take your hands, London, and kind of rub the ingredients in. Sometimes the wet ingredients mixing in with the dry, it kind of clumps it up. So again, that's why we wear gloves. So she's just going to rub everything together until she gets most of the little clumps out there. And at this point, if you want to add any more colorant, you can certainly do that. Do you want to add any more?
Maybe a few drops.
A few more drops? Okay. We'll do just a couple more. That good? Alright. And she's going to stir that in, and we'll just keep working the food coloring in with the dry ingredients until everything seems like it's fully incorporated, and then we'll go on to the next step. Keep working that in. Alright, so we've got everything all mixed in together. You can see that at this point it is starting to stick together a little bit like wet sand does, but it's not really sticky enough to hold together completely. So that is what the vegetable glycerin is for. Vegetable glycerin, this is actually like 100% pure. It's clear and odorless. You can use this for a number of different things, but it's perfect to hold all of your dry ingredients together so that you can actually put them into the bath bomb molds. I've seen some recipes that call for witch hazel. The problem with witch hazel is that it's another water-based product, so if you use too much of the witch hazel in your bath bomb, it activates it. So then you're not going to get a good foaming bath bomb. So I've worked with this recipe a few times now, and the vegetable glycerin seems to work really well. It doesn't activate any of the ingredients, and it holds everything together really well. So I'm going to mix this in for you, and we'll do just about a tablespoon at a time until it gets to the consistency that we need it to be. So we're going to mix that in there, and then if you want to work it through, your gloves will get a little sticky during this process because the vegetable glycerin is kind of like syrup. So it'll stick to your gloves a little bit, but luckily you can just take them off when you're done, and it's an easy cleanup. So we're going to be using these little silicone cupcake liners today to balance our bath bombs on. This was just something that we came up with that we thought most people would kind of have in their house. Maybe not the silicone liners, but you can also do a number of different things. You can take a baking sheet and put dry rice in the baking sheet so that whenever you formed your bath bombs and you set them down, it just kind of makes like a little cradle for it, which is essentially what the silicone molds do as well, or liners I should say. What do you think? Does it need a little bit more?
A little bit.
Okay. But there's a lot of different methods that you can use. There's even some molds that you put the bath bomb in and just kind of leave it in there overnight. I've heard the problem with those types of molds is that it takes a long time for your bath bombs to dry. You essentially can leave them in the little molds overnight, but then you have to let them set out an extra day to completely dry. So it's best to kind of leave them out into the air if you can. But we're just going to keep working in this vegetable glycerin until it gets to the right consistency. And then we have these cool little metal bath bomb molds, which again, I found on Amazon. I swear you can find everything on Amazon. And we'll be able to set them. They're like the perfect size for these little cupcake liners. So this recipe for, I would say this is about a 2.5 inch wide bath bomb. It makes about 5 or 6. So we'll be able to get several bath bombs out of this. London asked me before if you would be able to double the recipe if you needed to. And you certainly could, just depending on how big of a batch you want to make. Obviously, if you're making these to sell, you want to have a larger batch so that you can make a whole bunch of it all at once. So yeah, you can just double, triple the recipe however many times you need. You might have to tweak it here and there just to make it work for you, but yeah, doubling the recipe should be pretty easy. So we've got everything worked in. Let's test the consistency of it here. You want it to be like wet sand and be able to kind of put it back and forth in your hand without it crumbling. I think it's pretty close. Sometimes you'll have to add a little bit more vegetable glycerin about halfway through making all the bath bombs because it may be only settled to the top layer of your dry ingredients. So I'm going to do the first one, London, just so you can kind of see how I do it. And then we'll let you do the rest of them. So I'm just going to take my 2 bath bombs, halves of my bath bomb molds, and kind of mound them up like that. And then I'm just going to press them together and twist. And I kind of like to knock off the excess. And then I'm going to take my end of my whisk here and just kind of tap it. And voila, got a perfect side of a bath bomb. And then I like to take my cupcake liner and flip it upside down, and then very gently turn it over, and there you go. So I'm going to set that down gently, and then London, if you'd like to do one yourself. So you can actually, if you don't want to form this into a bath bomb, I have made this recipe as is, just without the last step of adding the vegetable glycerin. And it essentially becomes like a foaming, effervescing bath salt. There you go. It'll make kind of like a hollow sound once it's unstuck itself. Voila. I'll help you with this. Just because I know it's kind of hard to balance. There you go. And then kind of like cradle your hand on top of it. There you go. And then just gently turn it over. It's tricky, right? Just gently turn it over. There you go. Voila. Here, I'll help you. They are very delicate, so you do want to make sure that you are being careful with them. On a day like today, it's actually really humid. It's pouring down rain outside. You may find that they are a little bit stickier just because of the extra humidity. If you live in a really dry climate, like in Arizona or something like that, you might find that you have to add 3 or 4 tablespoons of the vegetable glycerin for it to actually hold together. Otherwise, it will just kind of be dry and crumble. I'm going to make another one because these are fun to do. Yeah. I really like this blue color that we've chosen here. So there's different recipes, obviously, for bath bombs. You can kind of make it your own. Some people prefer not to add the salts. You don't have to if you don't want to. But especially if you're trying to use them as like a medicated bath bomb, Epsom salts are really good for old achy muscles like mine. You probably don't have that problem. Not yet. But I played softball my whole life, so I know that I have used my fair share of Epsom salts or bath salts to kind of help with sore, achy muscles. You can certainly make these that way. You can also use a fragrance oil like peppermint or spearmint or something like that. If you have a cold, you can make if you have like a cold, like a bath fizzy for that, a cold and flu bath fizzy. And you can make it without the color if you want. You can make it without the fragrance if you want. The citric acid and like the baking soda and everything all working together, it actually makes your skin really soft. I find that this is a really good recipe to use, especially in the winter time, because it's really, I get really dry skin in the winter. Do you get dry skin in the winter?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really good if you have dry skin, because it kind of moisturizes your skin, but without making it too heavy. Ta-da! I love making these little things. Oh no! They are very fragile and delicate though.
Yeah.
But everybody kind of finds something that works for them. That goes with pretty much anything. Candle making, bath bombs, soaps. Do you want to make another one? Okay. I'm going to let London finish these guys up, and then we'll be able to show you the finished product. You do want to make sure that you put them in some kind of an airtight container. I would recommend shrink wrapping them. That tends to be the most popular type of container to use. You want a little bit more powder in the center? Here, let me help you. Teamwork! So we have some shrink wrap bags that we're going to be using along with like some wire ribbon so that it makes a really good seal around it, but we're not going to do that until they've completely set up. Otherwise the moisture will get trapped inside and they won't ever set up, they'll just kind of crumble. So we'll do that after these guys have set out overnight and have completely solidified, or hardened I should say. Very good. Just takes a steady hand and some patience.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a really great project to do with your kids. London's almost 13, so I know she's technically a teenager pretty much, but I know bath bombs are super trendy. Do all of your friends like using bath bombs? Your mom told me that you have like a whole bunch of them under your counter, or your bathroom cabinet. Well, now you know how to make your own. So you can make them for your friends, you can make them for presents, they make great teacher gifts, or for anybody, really. Anybody that likes to take a bath, which I do all the time.
Yeah.
So, alright, so we're going to let these guys set up overnight, and then we'll come back tomorrow and shrink wrap everything and show you how to finish everything out.
Yep.
Bye!
Bye.